So I like to have some I can statements whenever I'm doing a study session, because I do it when I teach in Michigan. When I teach my 8th graders, I do I can statements just to make sure that they understand that their learning is important. They need to say I can do this after this lesson. So obviously it's got to be I can create a historical letter depicting life as a soldier um, during World War I. And that's going to be the first one. The second one is, well, we're going to describe several hardships that soldiers had to face during World War I. We're going to use the information on the hardships that we learn. Either what you are going to eventually you might get into World Civ if you haven't done it already, but the information that you're going to learn from World War I is going to help you write an awesome letter. And even for the people that are going to listen, writing an awesome letter just from the information that we're going to talk about here in the next couple minutes. So the agenda, introduction, my expectations. I'm already kind of running over, but that's going to last about 5 minutes. I'm going to have a warm-up question. It says 5 minutes, but I doubt it's going to be 5 minutes because we only have a couple people logged in. And then next part I'm going to do is common mistakes that people make when writing a letter, or even just writing a short answer in history class. And then it's going to be paired with beginning a letter. That'll last about 10 minutes, and I'll piggyback a little bit off of lesson 3.3 in semester 2, or it's going to be, I believe, quarter 4 in World Civ. Then I'm going to have a 10-minute session where it says 10 minutes, but we can give and take there on any questions that you have that I could probably help you with. And then we're going to talk about the body of the letter, piggyback a little bit more off of life in a trench as a World War I soldier, which was not fun. Last little session of 10 minutes of, like I said, any questions that you have for me. And then I do a ticket out the door closing statement. And it says 60 minutes, but I don't think we're going to be here for 60 minutes. So let's get going. So here's a warm-up question. Go ahead and type it into the chat. This is just a warm-up question, so don't feel like you got to be right, or don't be freaking out because you think you're wrong. So before you write a letter, what is the first thing that you should probably have now on the piece of paper? When you're writing a letter or typing a letter, what's the first thing that you think you should have? I'll give you a couple minutes to write that down. So you have your name. Yeah, definitely. You need to have your name, especially when you're writing to someone. They got to know who's writing. That's awesome. Yeah. And yeah, you got to have an address, of course. That is, yeah, both those are 100% correct. You're right on that one. But one thing that I would also say is this is moving forward. This is, you would think it would be, wow, I can't believe I didn't think about that. But a salutation, an introduction. How are you? Okay. A date, yeah. But a salutation saying, dear whoever you're writing to. Who are you writing to? Mom, dad, brother, sister, uncle, dear whoever. And I like to see a date on there too, so they know about what time you're writing to them. And then an introduction. So these are the common mistakes that history students usually make when they're writing a letter, is they forget to write a salutation, which is dear whoever, a date, and then just a short introduction, which we'll get into that a little bit more. But introduction is just simple, you know, how are you? How are things going? Um, I was really eager to hear from you. Um, yeah, you're right. In a business letter, you always put your name and address first. That is 100%. You are 100% correct on that on a business letter. But yeah, we're not. I'm not really too worried about a business letter right now. But you are 100% correct on saying that you need to have your address on there, because most of the time, if it's going to be sent back to you, they got to know where it's coming from. Another mistake is they simply do not follow the paragraph requirement or the word count. You would think that that'd be a no-brainer, right? But so many students just skip over. Okay, I got to write 4 paragraphs. Well, I'm just going to write 1. Okay, they don't hit the requirement on that one. And limited information. It's I've seen students do an assignment, a writing assignment, or a letter, and it just seems like they didn't really read or do their studying on the information that they read in that lesson. It was just kind of blah in 1 paragraph. So limited information. And also, well, at the end, you got to have a closing statement. Kind of a just like you had in the beginning, and it's just like any writing assignment. You got to have a closing statement. You got to have a wrap up. Like for instance, I'm looking for, like for instance, when you are writing a letter, which we'll get into in a couple minutes, when you're writing a letter to a loved one, which this assignment will be, I'm waiting in anticipation to hear from you. So it just a short closing statement, and then of course a salutation. Yours truly, Sally. With love, Bobby. Okay, you gotta have a salutation to begin with and to end. So those are the common mistakes that I found while grading, that I would like to see. Like I said, this assignment 3.3 has been one of the assignments that I've seen kids struggle with, or students, I should say kids, students struggle with the most. So before we get into writing a letter, we got to have some background knowledge on life in the trenches. So in World War I, okay, we know that they had to, be in trenches. Okay, we know that they had to dig themselves in. So, quick question: why? I mean, you can type it in. You can answer it with your mic if you dare, without screaming, kids. Why do you think soldiers during World War I had to resort to digging trenches to survive? Why do you think soldiers during World War I had to resort to digging trenches? Like I said, if you don't know it, give it a try. But this is definitely what we're going to be learning here in the next couple of minutes, of why they had to resort to digging in trenches. So I see being in trenches offer them cover from enemy fire. You bet ya. Okay, you nailed it. Okay, because World War I changed the scope of warfare for the entire world. And you're thinking, well, how is that? Well, if you look at this picture, you're like, well, that doesn't really look like World War I to me. Okay, you're right. This is more of a colonial age, maybe late 1800s, mid 1800s. But as you can see in this picture, it represents traditional warfare really well. Traditional warfare was, okay, we have 100,000 soldiers and we're going to march on you in an open field, standing shoulder to shoulder with our rifles. That was traditional warfare. Large, face to face. We're going to march on you, and you're going to march on us on this huge open battle, and we're going to see who wins. but that was before, okay, what is this? Well, it's a machine gun. Before World War I, they didn't have the weapons. They didn't have the technology. So when in World War I, they had the same tactics. We're going to send thousands and thousands of troops across an open, barren land to face the enemy. But what they didn't, or what they forgot to take into account was a machine gun that could fire thousands of rounds per minute. So when we have hundreds of thousands of soldiers walking across the open landscape, they're meeting a machine gun on the other side. Not just a couple guys, but the other hundreds of thousands of people waiting for you all have machine guns. So they start seeing thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of people dying in this open field. And they said, this is ridiculous. We can't march. We're not going to go across land when there's a machine gun. So they dig in because it's all they can do. Is just dig in. So using what we know, just off of this quick little introduction to trench warfare and why they had to, why they had to be in a trench, we're gonna use that to start this letter. So let's take a look at real examples. So I'm going to actually get onto Buzz, and we're going to take a look at where are we at? There it is. Okay, so here is a really good example of a letter that's in the reading for lesson 3.3. Look, we have, dear mother, there's your salutation. Dear mother, perfect. Okay, and here we have, if you can see, have just come through a particularly nasty period. We went into the trenches on Wednesday night and Sunday morning at 5 a.m. Okay, so this is, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but this is an introduction. Okay, this is introducing what I'm feeling if I'm writing this as a soldier, what I'm doing, an introduction. Now, as we continue to look into this writing here, it talks about battles such as Neuve Chapelle, which was one of the early battles of the war that, well, to make things short, in one day, 40,000 soldiers were killed on the British side, and it was only fought over 1 mile of land. That's it. Okay, so that just shows you what I was talking about earlier about trench warfare, why they needed trenches. Because over a flat 1 mile stretch, 40,000 soldiers were gunned down by machine guns. It was a pretty gruesome scene, and soldiers, they didn't want to get out of their trenches because they were too scared. They didn't want to go through no man's land, which is the area between the trenches. But yeah, so looking back, you have your salutation here, dear mother. And usually, more often than not, the soldiers were writing to their mothers. Now you can, as a mother or a son, you can probably guess why soldiers' sons would want to write to their mother. There's just always been a connection between a son and his mother. And to writing to her in a really nasty war is comforting. So you see, dear mother, and then you have an introduction tidbit here. Does this help a little bit? Can I get some feedback on just starting a letter? Does this help at all in the information I'm giving? Awesome. All right, so let's move on. Oh, well, that's that one. So what I'm going to do, now that we got just the background information done, and just some tidbits of what we can do to make it better, just to start the letter, can I answer any questions for you at all? That's going to be helpful. Now I know there's only a couple of you in here, but if you have any questions at all, feel free to ask me. And those of you that are actually just listening to the recording while I'm talking to students on here, this could be a time for you just to get up, get a drink, go to the bathroom. As my principal says in meetings, drink and drain as you need. So this would be a good time for you to do that. Okay, I think I'm going to just jump right into, so we got our introduction to our letter. Easy. Okay, we had our salutation. We got an introduction piece. So we said, dear whoever we're writing to, life is fill in the blank. I've been doing fill in the blank. So now we got to write the body of the letter. Okay, the body is your 2 to 3 main paragraphs. That is your requirement. So for instance, life in the trenches is what? Okay, so let's take a look. So in order to write our body paragraph, okay, or our body to our letter, okay, we got to have some information. Okay, that's one thing that, remember, going back to the mistakes that I often see is we just don't have enough information available in your writing. It's because you didn't take your time to pay attention during the lesson. You gotta have enough information. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. We're going to be talking more about life in the trenches, so you are better equipped to writing a well thought out and full letter. So let's take a look. Let's go back to okay, so taking a look at this example, okay, we have how many paragraphs? Quite a few. 1, 2, 3, 4. And every single one of them, without reading them, has a lot of good information of what trench life is like. Okay, so going back, I know I'm jumping around here a lot. I apologize for those of you that are not following along. So life in the trenches. Okay, here's a picture of what's life like in the trenches. Okay, crowded, muddy, cold, damp. Okay, and you never knew when the next attack was coming. And this is a picture of what seems to be an offensive. So what usually would happen is you would have a trench for your team, right? And then you'd have however maybe 100 yards, maybe 50 yards, maybe 500 yards of no man's land, and then you have the trenches of the enemy, the group that you're fighting. And what they would do is they would bomb them and bomb them and bomb them. Okay, they would send shells, grenades, anything that would explode and try to disrupt these trenches, as you see. And once the shelling is over, okay, you have a whistle, you have a go to, and you climb up out of your trench and you charge over no man's land. That worked to a certain degree until their fortifications got better. Now these trenches are early forms of the trenches. The trenches that became many years into the war were really fortified. I mean, you saw it just looked like a house dug into the ground. So when these shells would hit, it would do no damage. No, you wouldn't be destroying any of the artillery for the other team. You wouldn't be killing any of the soldiers for the other team. So after the shelling, you would get up thinking, hey, we did some damage, and then you go across no man's land and you did no damage, and there's just as many soldiers across with a machine gun ready to mow you down. So you can see why soldiers would want to say, I'm not crossing over that no man's land. I'm not getting out of the trench. So life was not fun being in the trenches. As I said, it was cold, damp, stressful. You were crammed in there. And if someone got the flu, guess what? You're probably going to get the flu too. If someone got smallpox, you would probably get it too, because sanitation was basically non-existent in these trenches. Here's a picture. Oh, I go back here. Here's a picture of what appears to be no man's land. You can imagine 100,000 soldiers crossing over an open field as this, with machine guns on the other side and explosives. It was not a good scene. Hundreds and thousands of soldiers lost their lives simply because they had to cross, following orders, they had to cross over no man's land. So perfect. So here's, now that we got the information, now like I said, this is a really crude version of it. This is just skimming the surface on this. I'm just here to maybe give you some pointers. Here's a helpful hint to help you create a great body for your letters. A lot of words there, okay? So we have our introduction, correct? Now we got to do our body. Make a quick outline. And you can do this with anything other than the letter. Make a quick outline. So for instance, let me go through this real quick. Paragraph 1. Yeah, I know that I'm going to write a couple paragraphs. And we talked about the introduction. Well, quick summary of how things are going. What am I doing today? What did I do yesterday? What are our plans for the next day? And this next one is where I'm going to really dive in a little deeper. Paragraph 2, what is life like in the trenches? So these are just ideas that I'm putting down in some kind of an outline to know what I'm going to write about in each paragraph. So paragraph 2, what is life like in the trenches? Well, I know that a paragraph is 4 to 5 sentences. Okay, so what am I going to write about? I'm just kind of scatterbrained right now. I don't know what to write about. So I'm going to write down, well, I know it was cold and wet. Okay, I know that it was, it wasn't a fun place to be because it was cold and wet all the time. Okay, it was crowded. Okay, you're always right up against someone. And if someone got sick, you're probably going to get sick too. Okay, as I said, sickness went around rampant. Okay, and then stressful. Okay, you had to be awake. When it was your turn to be in the trench and looking over, you had to be awake for days at a time because you never knew when the next attack was coming. Okay, so here I have the beginning of 4 sentences in my paragraph. I know I can write a sentence on how cold and wet it is and give details. I know I can write a sentence about how crowded something is, or the trench is, with giving details. And I know I can make something from this sickness. I can make a whole sentence. I can make a whole paragraph from that. And then stressful, you can write a whole sentence about how stressful this is. So there you go. You have your 4 sentences, you have your paragraph. And just do that 3 times. Okay, so, and part of the assignment, you had to describe a battle. Okay, do the same thing. Okay, Just 4 keywords. What am I going to write about? Maybe how many people died. Maybe what time of the day it was. Maybe you can explain the bombardment. Okay, so you just make a quick outline. So I want to, before we go back to another discussion question time, I want to take a look back at our example from the lesson. So I'm going to read this a little bit. So here's our body right here, body of a paragraph. It has a lot of really good information. About early afternoon, I was hailed from the trench as to whether it was possible for me to get back. I replied in the affirmation, decided to run the risk of getting potted on the way. So I commenced crawling on my stomach until about a few yards from their parapet. Then made a spring and rushed headlong over the top. Okay, so here he's describing what it's like to maybe jump over the trench, get over the trench in an offensive. So he got a whistle. So his commanding officer said, "It's your turn to get over this whole group. We're gonna make an offensive, and you're gonna jump over." And he's talking about right there. So a lot of students, they make the mistake of not giving good details. So when you're writing about the offensive that you're part of, when you're writing writing about the battle, give details. How was it fought? How did you fight it? What did you do? Did you have to crawl on your stomach? Did you have to cut the barbed wire that was surrounding the trench? Did you get hurt? Did you get cuts on your leg? A lot of students make the mistake of not giving detail. So please, at this time, I'm going to, once again, I know it sounds very repetitive, but I'm going to open this time up once again for questions, okay, and discussion. So please, okay, take this time to look over the information I've given you. If you have any questions for me, how can I help you? If you need help with assignment, how can I help you? Okay, moving on. So ending your letter, this next 10 minutes or so, I want to talk about how we got to end our letter. So we got our body in. Or first was back up. We got our salutation in. Then we did an introduction. How are you doing? This is my life right now. This is what I'm doing. And then we have a body, right? Our 2 to 3 paragraphs of what life has been like, giving details, and then you got to end it. So you're not going to write all day. Okay, so you got to end your letter somehow. What I like to do, and it's not, like I said, you can use these tips not just for writing a letter. You can use these tips for writing a short essay. You can use these tips for writing just a paragraph or two. when you're doing an assignment. It all goes down to the point where you have an introduction, you have a body that has the information that you're trying to get across, and then you have your concluding paragraph, your part that concludes it, wraps it up. You're not just going to write your letter and say, today I went to the battle, and then my friend was wounded, I got sick, bye. It just doesn't sound right. So you need to conclude your paragraphs. For instance, it is time for me to wrap up. We are about to move out on an offensive. I hope this letter gets to you. I hope all is well. I hope to hear from you soon. Just those kind of examples really helps wrap up and conclude your paragraph. And then at the end, it's really simple. You start with a salutation, you end with one. So yours truly, John. And if you don't, in this circumstance, you don't have to write as a man. You can write as a woman if you wanted to. It's your letter. So you could say, in love, Susan. Okay, if you want to write as a man or woman, it does not matter. But you got to have a salutation at the end. That's a must. You can't just say, all right, I'm gonna go now, bye. Okay. That's what my 8th graders do now when I'm doing a lesson in Michigan here. They just, well, bye. Okay. I was like, no, you can't do that. You got to have a salutation. You got to say, in love, fill in the blank. So let's go back to the real example. I know this is back and forth, but look, from your affectionate son, Dick. Okay, that's pretty easy. That's a great salutation. From your affectionate son, Dick. Okay, and here we have kind of a concluding paragraph. And this concluding paragraph, he's talking about what things he probably needs from home. Okay, I'm running out of supplies. I need this. I need a towel. I need a brush. Okay, and then you have the conclusion. Must close now. Much love to all from your affectionate son, Dick. He wraps it up. Doesn't leave the reader hanging. The reader knows that he's done writing. And you can use, that technique in other ways of writing too. You got to have some kind of ending and wrap up. So I like to add at the end, this went a little bit quicker than I thought. It would have been really good to have more people so we could have more of a discussion. But it was like I said, it was shorter than I expected. But at the end, I like to have a ticket out the door. I like to test your knowledge about what you learned. I do this in a classroom setting, and I like to do this online too. So once you write your ticket, write your statement, you're free to go. That's what I tell my students. If you get your ticket done and it looks pretty good, then happy rest of your day. So here's your question. In a short statement, I'd say 2 to 3 sentences. What do you think, and what were several hardships that a soldier faced during World War I? Just from me spewing some information in the past 30 minutes, what are some hardships that a soldier faced during World War I? So once you're done, once you get your statement done. If you want to stick around and discuss a little more, that's fine. But if you have things to do, have something else to study for, have someone to take care of, then it was good to know you. That's what I like to say to my students. So what were several hardships that a soldier faced in World War I?